Listen to this calmly, because what I'm about to say might make you feel a little uncomfortable. Imagine that today you achieve everything you've always wanted. Enough money, recognition, success, pleasure, comfort, everything. Now let me ask you something honestly. Do you think that would completely fill your heart? Do you think that after achieving it all, you would no longer feel any emptiness? The book of Ecclesiastes begins with a phrase that hits like a hammer. "Vanity of vanities," says the preacher. "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity." Ecclesiastes 1:2. It is not a pessimistic phrase. It is an honest one. Today I want to speak to you as if we were sitting face to face without any rush. Because this message is not just an ancient story from the Bible. It is a conversation that crosses centuries and reaches directly to you. The author of this book, traditionally associated with Solomon, was a man who had everything: power, wealth, wisdom, fame, literally everything that many people today spend their entire lives pursuing. And even so, after experiencing it all, he came to a conclusion that you might not expect. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt that life moves in circles? You work, you rest, you go back to work. The days pass, the years pass, and suddenly you look back and think, what was all of this for? The same book describes it like this: one generation passes away, and another generation comes, but the earth remains forever. Ecclesiastes 1:4. Think about this for a moment. People pass, empires pass, trends pass, but the world keeps turning as if nothing happened. Maybe no one has ever told you this so clearly, but the Bible dares to do it. Many of the things we worry about today, in 100 years will carry no weight at all. And I know this idea may seem harsh, but in reality, it is liberating. Because when you understand that many things are temporary, you begin to search for what truly has eternal value. So I want to ask you something very personal. What are you really placing your hope in? Because the preacher of Ecclesiastes spent years searching for meaning in everything. Knowledge, pleasure, work, wealth, and what he discovered can change the way you see your own life. But things are only just beginning here. Because when that search began, he realized something unsettling about wisdom itself. And when you hear it, it might make you think about your own story too. I want you to think about something with me for a moment. Many people believe that if they understood life better, if they were more intelligent, if they had more knowledge, then they would finally find the peace they are looking for. But listen to what the preacher discovered in Ecclesiastes. After pursuing wisdom with all his strength, he said something surprising. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. Ecclesiastes 1:18. It may sound strange at first, but if you think about it, it makes sense. The more you understand the world, the more you see injustice. The more you see suffering, the more you see how fragile everything is. Let me ask you something very directly. Have you ever wished you didn't know certain things? Sometimes ignorance feels more peaceful, but when your eyes are fully opened, you begin to realize that many promises of the world cannot deliver what they promise. And then the preacher decided to try something else. If wisdom did not fill the heart, what about pleasure? So he said to himself, "Come now, I will test you with mirth. Therefore enjoy pleasure." Ecclesiastes 2:1. Imagine that. A man with unlimited wealth, with the power to obtain anything, with time to experience every kind of pleasure. Parties, music, gardens, palaces, riches. Nothing was out of his reach. He tried everything. Everything that many people today dream of achieving. But after living it, he looked back at his life with honesty, and his conclusion was just as surprising as it was uncomfortable, because he said something that almost no one dares to say today. This also was vanity. Ecclesiastes 2:1. Let me speak to you frankly. Society constantly tells us that happiness is found in enjoying more, in having more, in experiencing more things. But the book of Ecclesiastes breaks that illusion. Because someone who already had all of that looked back and discovered that the human heart still longs for something deeper, something that money cannot buy, something that pleasure cannot sustain, something that success cannot guarantee. And this is where the story begins to get really interesting, because after exploring wisdom and after testing pleasure, the preacher decided to examine something that all of us do almost every day: work. And what he discovered about work might make you rethink many things about your own life. Now let me ask you something very simple, but very deep. What do you really work for? Maybe your first answer would be to live, to pay bills, to take care of your family, to move forward. And all of that makes sense. But listen to what the preacher says in Ecclesiastes when he began to reflect on human work. What profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? Ecclesiastes 1-3. It is an uncomfortable question, because it is not asking whether work is necessary. It is asking something deeper. What truly remains at the end of all that effort? Think about this with me. You work for years to build something, but then another generation comes that did not fight for it and receives it. The preacher observed that too. I hated all my labor in which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. Ecclesiastes 2:18. Imagine that moment. Years of effort, years of sacrifice, years trying to build something meaningful. And in the end, everything passes into someone else's hands. Maybe someone wise, maybe someone foolish, and you can no longer control it. Now I want you to reflect with complete honesty. How many people live completely consumed by work? How many sacrifice their peace, their family, even their health, believing that this will finally give their life meaning? The preacher observed that reality thousands of years ago, and this also is vanity and grasping for the wind. Ecclesiastes 2:17. But wait. He is not saying that work is bad. What he is pointing out is something deeper. When work becomes the center of your life, it will never be able to fully satisfy your heart. Because the human heart was created for something greater, something eternal, something that does not disappear with time. That is why the preacher began to observe another reality of life that we all experience, but rarely accept: time. Because there are moments in life for everything, moments that no one can stop. And when you hear how the Bible describes it, you will probably recognize many parts of your own story. Now I want us to pause and think together about something no one can control: time. You can have money, you can have power, you can have intelligence, but there is something you will never be able to stop or speed up: the passing of time. The preacher understood this perfectly and wrote one of the most well-known passages in all the Bible in Ecclesiastes. Listen carefully. To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. Ecclesiastes 3:1. And then he begins to describe life in a way that will probably feel very familiar to you. A time to be born, and a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck what is planted. Ecclesiastes 3:2. Think about your own life for a moment. There are times of joy, but also times of tears. There are moments when everything seems to move forward, and others when everything seems to stand still. The Bible says it like this: a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance. Ecclesiastes 3:4. What is surprising is that this was written thousands of years ago, and yet it still perfectly describes human experience today. Because life is never a straight line. There are seasons, moments when everything flourishes, and moments when everything seems to fall apart. But here comes a deeply powerful idea that the preacher also discovered. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity in their hearts. Ecclesiastes 3:11. I want you to think carefully about this sentence. God has placed eternity in the human heart. That means something very important. The emptiness you sometimes feel, that sense that something is missing, that constant search for meaning, is not a mistake. It is a signal. It is like an inner compass pointing toward something eternal. That is why no temporary thing can fully satisfy the human heart. Not money, not success, not pleasure, not even recognition, because we were created for something greater. But when the preacher began to look at the world more closely, he noticed something else that can also be difficult to accept: injustice. Because sometimes in life, things do not happen the way they should, and when he began to reflect on that, his words became even deeper. Now I want us to think about something you have probably seen many times: injustice. Because if you look at the world honestly, you will notice something that can be difficult to understand. Many times, good people suffer, and many times, unjust people seem to prosper. The preacher also observed this in Ecclesiastes, and he expressed it with surprising honesty. In the place of judgment, wickedness was there, and in the place of righteousness, iniquity was there. Ecclesiastes 3:16. It is as if he were saying, I looked at the world, and I saw that many things do not work the way they should. Maybe you have had moments like that too. Moments when you look around and think, this is not fair. This should not be happening. Why does this happen? But the preacher did not remain only in that observation. He also remembered something important. God shall judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time there for every purpose and for every work. Ecclesiastes 3:17. That is, even though many things may seem out of order now, the story does not end here. There will be a moment when everything will be set right. Now let me tell you something very directly. Many people spend their entire lives trying to understand every injustice in the world. They try to resolve every question, every mystery, every pain. But the book of Ecclesiastes reminds us of something humble and profound. Not everything that happens under the sun can be fully understood. And even so, life continues. That is why the preacher began to look at something that we all share, without exception: the fragility of life. Because in the end, rich and poor, wise and foolish, strong and weak, we all walk toward the same destination. But before continuing with this very deep reflection, I want to ask you something sincerely. If this story is making you think, if these words are touching something inside you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel right now. Yes, really. Because here we continue exploring together messages from the Bible that can change the way we see life. And many people discover truths they had never heard before. So if you haven't done it yet, subscribe now, turn on notifications, and join us on this journey of reflection. Believe me, what comes in the next pages is even more impactful. Because when the preacher began to speak about death, his words became even more honest. Now we are going to talk about something almost no one wants to mention: death. It is not a comfortable topic. Many people prefer to avoid it, change the subject, or distract themselves with anything else. But the preacher in Ecclesiastes chose to face it directly. And what he said is so straightforward that even today it makes us reflect. For what happens to the sons of men also happens to animals. One thing befalls them. As one dies, so dies the other. Ecclesiastes 3:19. It is a strong statement, because it reminds us of something we often forget. Human life is fragile. You can have wealth, prestige, or power, but none of those things can stop the passing of time. The preacher summarized it this way: all go to one place. All are from the dust, and all return to dust. Ecclesiastes 3:20. Perhaps when hearing this, someone might think, then everything is useless. But interestingly, the message of Ecclesiastes is not meant to take value away from life. It is meant to awaken us. Because when you understand that life is limited, you begin to value what truly matters. You begin to see your days in a different way. The people you love, the simple moments, the opportunities you have today. That is why the preacher also reached an interesting conclusion. There is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his own works. Ecclesiastes 3:22. In other words, while we live under the sun, we should learn to appreciate the gifts that God allows us to experience, not with desperation, not with anxiety, but with gratitude. But as the preacher continued to observe the world, he noticed something else that also affects us deeply. Loneliness. Because even in the middle of success, work, and achievements, a human being can feel incredibly alone. And when he began to reflect on this, he left a teaching that many people still remember today. A teaching about the importance of not walking through life completely alone. I want you to think about something very human: loneliness. In a world full of people, social media, noise, and constant activity, it is surprising how many people feel deeply alone. The preacher also observed this in Ecclesiastes, and he described a scene that you have probably seen more than once. There is one alone, and he has no companion. He has neither son nor brother, yet there is no end to all his labor. Ecclesiastes 4:8. Imagine that image. A person who works without stopping, who accumulates things, who constantly strives. But when the day ends, there is no one to share life with. And then the preacher asks a question that strikes directly at the heart. For whom do I labor and deprive myself of good? Ecclesiastes 4:8. It is a very deep question, because it forces us to think about whether we are living only to produce or to truly live. That is why the preacher states something very beautiful. Two are better than one. Ecclesiastes 4:9. Why? Because when one falls, the other can lift him up. Because when one grows tired, the other can encourage him. The Bible says it like this: For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. Ecclesiastes 4:10. Life was never designed to be walked completely alone. God created human beings for relationship, for friendship, for family, for community. But even with people around us, the preacher began to notice something else that can also deceive the human heart. Fame, recognition, the idea of being admired by others. Because many people believe that if one day they are recognized, applauded, or famous, then they will finally feel complete. But when the preacher observed this carefully, he discovered something that once again challenges our expectations. Now I want us to think together about something that many people today desire more than anything else. Recognition, to be admired, to be applauded, to be seen. Today we might call it fame, popularity, or influence. But that same pursuit already existed thousands of years ago when Ecclesiastes was written. The preacher observed something very interesting about this. He saw people who rose to power, who were admired, who seemed to have everyone's support. But over time, something inevitable happened. People forgot them, and he expressed it like this: Yet those who come afterward will not rejoice in him. Ecclesiastes 4:16. Think about this for a moment. Throughout history, there have been kings, celebrities, leaders, people who were extremely famous. But a few decades pass, and almost no one remembers their names. It is like a wave. It rises. It looks huge. It seems unstoppable, and then it disappears into the sea of time. That is why the preacher returns again to that same conclusion that runs throughout the entire book. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. Ecclesiastes 4:16. Now let me speak to you with complete honesty. The human heart often seeks validation in what others think, in approval, in applause, in attention. But all of that is fragile. Today people applaud you. Tomorrow they can forget you. Today someone admires you. Tomorrow someone else may take all the attention. That is why the preacher begins to direct our attention toward something much more important: our relationship with God. Because after observing wisdom, pleasure, work, time, injustice, death, loneliness, fame, and wealth, the moment comes to reflect on something much deeper: how we approach God. And what he says about this is a warning that many of us need to hear. Now I want you to imagine something with me. You walk into a place of prayer, maybe a church, maybe a quiet place where someone comes near to God. But the preacher in Ecclesiastes gives a very important warning about that moment. Listen carefully. When you go to the house of God, walk carefully and draw near to listen rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools. Ecclesiastes 5:1. In other words, when you come near to God, listen more than you speak. Sometimes people come to God with many words, many promises, many requests, but with very little willingness to truly listen. That is why it also says, "Do not be quick with your mouth, and do not let your heart hasten to utter anything before God." Ecclesiastes 5:2. It is a reminder of humility. God is in heaven, and we are on earth. Sometimes we forget that. And then the preacher observes another very common trap of the human heart, the love of money. Listen to this phrase, which is still incredibly relevant today. "He who loves money will not be satisfied with money." Ecclesiastes 5:10. Think about it carefully. Many people believe that if they just had a little more, then they would finally be satisfied. But the desire for more never ends. When you have little, you want more. When you have more, you want even more. And the preacher saw this clearly thousands of years ago. That is why he reminds us of something that seems simple but is very deep. True peace is not found in accumulating, but in learning to live with gratitude before God. But after exploring all these realities of life, wisdom, pleasure, work, time, injustice, death, loneliness, fame, and wealth, the book of Ecclesiastes finally arrives at its conclusion. A conclusion that brings everything together. And when you hear it, you may understand the true purpose of life in a completely different way. We have walked through many reflections together. We have talked about wisdom, about pleasure, about work, about time, about injustice, about death, about loneliness, about fame and money. And after observing all of this with honesty, the preacher of Ecclesiastes finally reaches a clear and powerful conclusion. Listen very carefully to these words. "The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all." Ecclesiastes 12:13. Pause for a moment on that sentence. After exploring all of human life, the conclusion is not success. It is not money. It is not pleasure. It is not fame. The conclusion is a right relationship with God, because in the end, everything we see under the sun is temporary, but what we do before God carries eternal weight. That is why the text continues. "For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil." Ecclesiastes 12:14. This is not a threat. It is a reminder that our life truly has meaning. Every decision, every word, every act of love, every act of injustice, nothing goes unnoticed by God. And here I want to speak to you directly, as if we were finishing this conversation face to face. Maybe today you are searching for meaning. Maybe you are tired of chasing things that do not satisfy your heart. Maybe you are beginning to realize that life needs something deeper. The message of Ecclesiastes is not despair. It is awakening. It is opening your eyes and understanding that the true purpose of life is to walk with God, to know Him, and to live according to His will. And before we finish, I want to ask you something sincerely. If this story made you reflect, if these words helped you see life from a different perspective, subscribe to the channel right now. Yes, right now. Because on this channel, we continue exploring the Bible in a deep, clear, and direct way. And many people are rediscovering messages that can transform the way they live. So subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this message with someone who also needs to hear it. Because sometimes a single reflection can change the direction of an entire life.